Welcome back to the Lemon Factor. I'm Chad, and today is our last video, video number 5 in our air intake comparison series, in which I take you through various intakes available for the 10th generation Honda Accord. And with some of these air intakes, I go through the detailed install process. I have provided you with various sound clips, and we've taken each one of them to the dyno to see how much horsepower each one of these air intakes produces and see how it compares to the manufacturer's claims. This is the final video in which we're going to crown a winner. Is it going to be the Mishimoto air intake? Is it going to be the AFE Takeda Momentum air intake? Or is it going to be the PRL high volume intake? If you're interested in hearing a little bit more additional information that was not provided in each one of the individual videos that we created, and you'd like to find out my thoughts as far as what I think is the best air intake available, at least out of these 3 air intakes that we tested, then stay tuned. Stay until the end of this video. At the end of this video, I am going to provide you with information as far as how you can directly influence what we do with this channel, what we test as far as modifications. We can go in many, many different directions, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to influence what direction we're going to go in. I'll give you more information at the end of this video. Let's start off with the quality of the materials, the fit and finish, and the install process itself. So right off the bat, I'm going to say in last place is the AFE Takeda. The materials were a little cheap. The alignment of screws and bolts just wasn't there. The fit and finish was disappointing. I think it's very close between second and first. I think the materials from Mishimoto are fine. However, I feel like the materials and the fit and finish from PRL is just one step above. That's not saying anything bad against Mishimoto. I think the Mishimoto is absolutely fine, but PRL just takes it up one step higher. And you know what? They probably should, considering how much more it costs in comparison to the Mishimoto. Now, one caveat with that is the PRL's install is a little bit more complicated because you have to remove the OEM air intake resonator, which is located right underneath the air filter box. And that is a pain in the ass. That is an added step that you don't have with the AFE Takeda and you don't have with the Mishimoto. So, all right, let's talk about the sound that these air intakes produce. Now remember, these are closed, for the most part, closed box systems. If you're looking for an air intake, just so that you can hear the sounds that the air intake makes, sucking in the air into the turbo and ultimately into the engine, these are not the air intakes for you. A better air intake system would be an open system. That way you can hear all of the sounds you're probably looking for. However, with the open system, I do not believe, although I have not tested all of them, I do not believe you will experience any performance gains. And quite frankly, I think you will potentially lose horsepower and torque with an open system. Comparatively speaking, between the Mishimoto, the AFE Takeda, and the PRL high volume air intake, I would say the Mishimoto wins out. Mishimoto has some pretty good sounds. You can induce those sounds relatively easier than the other two. In addition to that, Mishimoto has the panel on top of the air intake box that you can remove. If you're in a situation where maybe it's winter, maybe it's cold outside, maybe you're just like, you know what, I don't care about the horsepower, I just want to hear it, and you want to remove that lid, it's easily removed. I would say Takeda comes in second, and then PRL high volume air intake comes in last. Before I did any of the testing, I reached out to all 3 manufacturers, PRL, Mishimoto, and the AFE Takeda, And I let them know that I was testing. And I asked them, hey, do you have any recommendations? Is there anything I should know, etc.? Giving them an opportunity to voice their opinion on the process. And I didn't hear back from PRL or the AFE Takeda. I did hear back from Mishimoto. They kept referencing back to their website, which really didn't have much information. So I gave them an opportunity to have their say in what the process should look like. Now, let's talk about that process. As part of the install, I disconnected the battery because I wanted to give the car, the ECU, the ability to relearn if it needed to. And I drove the car anywhere between 150 to 200 miles because what I didn't want to do was put it on a dyno as soon as I installed it, run it, get a number, and then find out after a couple weeks of driving, after a couple hundred miles, that number is irrelevant. Your car is going to behave differently. Maybe on the dyno, as soon as you installed it, it was running lean and it was actually producing a better number than 2 weeks later and for the rest of the ownership of that air intake. Now, of course, that leads it to, well, if you did that, your conditions under which you dyno the car are going to be different. Yes, that is possible. However, the dyno does have, so that you can compare, the ability to make adjustments based on barometric pressure, humidity, and temperature, right? Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. It's going to get really, really close. So these are corrected. In addition to that, I also made sure that when I dynoed each one of these air intakes, it was on a day that had, relatively speaking, the same air temperature. I'm trying to do this so I can make a decision. I'm trying to do this for all of you so that you can make a decision what's right for you and get some independent information away from what the manufacturers are claiming. The conditions at which I ran the dyno were identical, nearly identical as you can from doing it from day to day, meaning that I had the two fans always in the same position, one pointed at the intercooler, one pointing at the air intake scoop. I let the car run multiple dyno pools until I started getting consistent numbers. So if it was wildly off from the first to the second to the third, I didn't even include those. I waited until all of a sudden I had consistent numbers before I said, this is the number. I used a K-tuner and did not do another dyno pool until the ECT, the engine coolant temperature, was at 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's one. And always waited until the IAT and the IAT2, your intake air temperatures, were within a similar range. So for all the pools for each air intake and all the air intakes, I waited for those conditions. That takes away any potential for heat soak. As far as K control numbers, this is interesting. This is interesting. So for Mishimoto and for PRL, they were rock solid at 0.48, 0.49, which is my standard. So that's what it would have been without the air intake. They never moved for the 100 to 200 miles I drove the car. They never moved on the dyno when I was running the car. But the AFE Takeda, those K control numbers fluctuated drastically after I installed the air intake. I experienced situations where all of a sudden my K control jumped up to 0.7 something, and then over a little bit of time and over some miles, it would drop back down, it would jump back up. It was all over the place and it was concerning. And I get it, before some of you jump on the comments and say you had some bad gas, I don't think it was that, because I had the gas in the car and I filled it up somewhere else, a different Shell gas station, a second time, and it didn't change. And that gas was still in the car when I put the PRL high volume air intake on the car. So I swapped it out with the car having the same tank of gas. And when I switched it to the PRL, 0.48, 0.49, rock solid. So if it was the gas, I would have experienced that with the PRL air intake, and I didn't. So I have reason to believe that the AFE Takeda air intake, the design, whatever it was doing, was causing some erratic readings. You put it on the dyno, you lost horsepower because your K control was too high. No, I waited until the K control came back down to 0.48, 0.49. Like I said, it didn't raise and stay there. It was fluctuating up and down over 100 to 200 miles of driving the car. So it wasn't constantly high. But when I got it onto the dyno, I made sure it was at 0.48, 0.49. So it was consistent with Mishimoto and it was consistent with the PRL. Who's the winner of the dyno? You know what? It's not AFE Takeda. When we're looking at the Mishimoto compared to the PRL high volume air intake, I think it's a draw. The fact that both of them show gains above 4,000 RPMs, and they're consistent on the horsepower and torque, and both of them have smoother curves below 4,000, smoother airflow. You know, when it comes down to it, I'd say it's your choice. However, the price difference is hard to ignore. If you're going to add additional FBO modifications, bigger turbo, custom tune, etc., if you have a plan, and that's only one, an air intake is only one modification of many, then you might want to subscribe to this channel because we're going to continue adding our modifications on and testing them. We don't all have unlimited budgets to buy everything we can, and sometimes it'd just be nice to know what is the best bang for your buck. Or, hey, if I can get 90% of the way there horsepower-wise and only spend half the money, maybe I'll do that. But what does that look like, right? Let's find out together. Now, I promised you at the beginning of this video that I was going to go through how you can influence that. I have set up the ability for you to become a patron of the channel. And what does that mean? You can become a patron. There's different levels. And one of the levels of the patron program is the ability to decide how we move forward. What modifications are we going to buy? Are we going to install? Are we going to review? And are we going to dyno test, right? If you're a patron and you specifically sign up for that level of engagement, I will look to you to help make those decisions. This isn't cheap and I don't have unlimited funds, so any little bit of help we can get to fund the testing of these products, I would appreciate. And I really want to give those of you who've been, you know, the biggest fans of the channel, the ability to have a larger voice, the ability to pull the channel, push the channel in a direction that you see fit. So with that said, I'm going to leave a link to the Patreon page in the description below. It gives different levels with different levels of benefit to patrons like yourself. So with that said, I really hope all of you enjoyed the air intake comparison series. So thank you very much for joining, and until next time.